So for today's lab exercise, we're going to be constructing a dichotomous key, but really going through a lot of the background, getting up to the point where we can make the dichotomous key. This would be the kind of work that involves a lot of research into the species, really to get familiar with them and to know the differences between species. And we're going to take advantage of work that other people have done before us. So this is pretty common in science. We're going to build upon previous work. So probably the best comprehensive list of characters belonging to species would be the flora of North America. And today's example, we're going to do the genus called Trillium. So I'm going to do a search for Trillium, FNA, Flora North America. There are two versions of the Flora of North America site. There's this one, which is the older version. And then there's a newer one that goes by the name of beta dot. So the beta test of Flora of North America, the new version. So for some reason, when I do a search for the genus, I get only species at a time, but I can go through the newer version. I think it's kind of fancier here. So we're going to use that one, and I'm going to click back to the genus level. And maybe I'm going to hold this in a new window here for when we maybe want to come back to it. All right, so going back here, I'm going to click on Genus Trillium. You can already see there might be quite a few species. So this is Genus Trillium, subgenus Trillium. Sometimes when you get a big genus, there are multiple subdivisions. And then this happens to be species Trillium grandiflorum. That might be one of ours. Let's check. Oh, there it is in Wisconsin. So Trillium grandiflorum will be one that we consider as we're doing our treatment. So let's see, there's a whole description of what it means to be a trillium plant. So this is a description of the genus, and this should apply to all species in the genus. So herbaceous plants, Scapes talks about this flowering stalk, bracts, flowers, inflorescences are all uniformly described as one flowered. So that'll be helpful. Descriptions of the flowers, fruits, seeds, and so on. So we don't have to go through all of that. That's going to be the same across all the genera we're dealing with. All right, so lower taxa here, we've got two different subgenera, subgenus Trillium, subgenus Philanthrum. I don't know what species belong to these. We're not going to worry about subgenera. All right, so there's a whole bunch in this Philanthrum and subgenus Trillium, also quite a few species. So overall, how many species? So 43 species of Trillium, and then 38 in the flora. That means 38 in the geographic region that's covered by Flora of North America. That would be north of Mexico. So we want to trim this down. We don't want to do a project that involves 43 species. That would not be fun. So we're going to compare those names against the names available in Wisconsin Flora. So WisFlora is the website, the online virtual flora of Wisconsin. This is the website run by the herbarium at UW-Madison and contributed with contributions from other herbaria in the state. And we can do a search by the genus here, Trillium. And we get a list here. First one is actually the genus. So this bracket is common names. So a common name for Trillium is Trillium. Then we've got a set of species here. We're not going to worry about the subspecies or varieties or anything like that. So I chose this as our example because this is a fairly bite-sized list of species to work with. So we've got 6 species. And so what I've done is to go through the genus level treatment, and I've grabbed individual species descriptions. So let's just find one of these species, Trillium cernuum. I'm just going to do a search by that one to find it. Trillium cernuum. There's a key here, but this is again a key to 43 species in North America. One of my ongoing projects for this class is for us to actually come up with a key to Wisconsin plants. These keys exist, but I think it'd be interesting and maybe useful for us to come up with one on our own and make sure that it's as useful as it could possibly be. So let's click here on Trillium cernum, author Linnaeus, common names, nodding trillium, flora of North America, north of Mexico, includes some places with French-speaking places, people. So Trille Penché, Couldn't get that wrong, I don't speak French. Here we got our range, includes Wisconsin, and here's a description. So I did already for us, I've copied these down and ported them over. So we've got an entry for each of them, and there's a lot of text in here. There are bolded words that are the beginnings of sentences, and those are different features of the plants. This is pretty common to go like through vegetative characteristics, then up through kind of bigger to smaller parts of the flower, etc. So we're kind of working our way from the outside to the inside of the flower, then a description of the fruits, and so on. So how in the world do we make sense of all this? Well, good question. So I've got a strategy. One, we're going to take advantage of the fact that the people who do flora of North America, they're very particular. They're, even among botanists, I'd say they're some of the more particular people. So they're controlling the punctuation. There's a specific use for a period and a specific use for a semicolon and so on. So we're going to be able to take advantage of that and use those to our advantage as we turn our paragraph description into more of a spreadsheet kind of version. So I'm going to do a copy here, and let me come up with a new spreadsheet. I'm going to do a whole bunch of stuff in Google Drive here. So this is free and available if you wanted to use it. Depending, there might be an opportunity for students to collaborate on something like this. I'm going to, let's just do a paste and see what we get. Okay, so right now, the whole paragraph is in one cell of this spreadsheet. And I'm gonna move it up so it's in the second cell, I guess. One thing we can do is to use this feature in the data menu of split text to columns. So you can go through there and have it find a punctuation or something that will separate these out. I think right now it's looking for commas, and those aren't as useful to us. So first thing we could do maybe is to find the periods. And I'm not always sure what we're gonna get. Period has gotten us some of these numeric divisions. So 2.5 has split itself across two columns. Let me see if I can do something a little more special. I'm going to do period space. All right. So period space would take the periods that end sentences, but not the ones that are in numbers, like decimal points. And I think I want to maybe, just for now, take these and put them in different rows. Because the next thing I'm going to do is to split them by semicolons. And when you do this data split text to columns, if there's something in the way, it'll overwrite it. So we don't want to overwrite any information here. But I guess conveniently, now that I've done this, I can take these all and do the data split again and see if I can maybe split this out by semicolon and get something useful. We'll see what happens. All right, so we did the semicolon split, and still pretty heavy divisions there. Might take a little data curation on this. I think we get more often commas. Undo here and go back to where I don't have any divisions. And I think I'm going to do columns this time. So we've got kind of a collection of commas, semicolons, and periods that are useful for telling things apart. I might have to come back to you on this one. I'm a little bit torn. The commas make too many divisions, I think. So for example, here where it says sepals, spreading, green, lanceolate ovate. I don't know if all of those aspects are going to be things that we're necessarily going to split apart. So let me go back and do semicolons. And maybe that'll be good enough. I'm going to try to grab these over. So I have my text running into the next boxes if it's too long. One thing you could change if you wanted to, you could change the format for text wrapping to clip, and then you wouldn't see blink. You wouldn't see the text running over the ends of any of these boxes. So I could grab these all and move them up. And that's still quite a bit to worry about. So each one of these, a lot going on. I think I'll stop the video for a second, and I'm going to try to make equivalent lines for the other species of Trillium, and then I'll come back to you. All right, you know what? I'm going to leave the video on. If you're curious to know how I get there, this will show you. And if you wanted to fast forward, maybe I guess you want to fast forward the video until you get the, I don't know, at some point you'll see these all in different columns, and maybe that'll be useful. Maybe you'll just watch me work here. So I'm going to split text to columns. For these other species, I already copied over their text. I'm going to do custom again, period space, separates those out. I'm going to create a little space in between all of that. Wasn't a good idea. If I ever do anything quickly, it's probably hitting the undo button. Use some keyboard shortcuts sometimes. All right, ribosomes, scapes, bracts, flower. All right, don't know what happened with that one. I got a little extra text here. Wow, that's a lot of text on the old flower. Ah, yes. So my period space worked mostly, except I had a little extra text here where it said this CA circa, which is a fancy way of saying about, and it took that and it turned it into a new line. I want to actually grab this text and put it back in with the old flower description. All right. I guess ideally you'd have a lot of time to piece this all together for yourself. All right, there's another one. So this is another one, ends with CA. That's going to be, undo. All right, circa, and I'm going to cut and paste that over the top of that. So every species should have an equivalent name, then rhizomes, then scapes, then bracts, then flower, then fruits, right? Rhizome, scape, bract, flower, fruit. Rhizomes, scapes, bracts, flowers, fruits. Scapes, bracts, flowers, fruits. And one last circa. Okay, I think I got everybody. I'm going to do the format where I clip these, just make sure. Oh, I missed one. See if anything ends in a, there we go. This one ends in a CA also. Circa 1/5 rect length. Okay. We make a lot of progress, but there's some things that sort of fall through the cracks. Okay. So now I'm going to split by semicolons again. And I saved a little bit of time by making this happen over all the different species at the same time. I'm going to do the format feature where I clip everybody. So that's already set. That's good. And this way I should be able to paste everybody into equivalent columns. All right, I noticed not everything's lining up. We'll make that work in a little bit here. So I guess I'm taking advantage of some punctuation, some kind of standardized punctuation in the descriptions to give myself spreadsheet blocks that split these out a little bit better. This is really a way to do this comprehensively. You also could, I guess, sort of hunt around for features that are described that look like they're going to be useful. Just grab all these and bring them up a little bit more. I mean, grab all of these, bring them up a little bit more. All right, so I accidentally dragged that over the wrong block, so I'm going to do an undo there. Okay, so what you could do is to insert like a header and maybe describe these. So right now, as it's come across, we got rhizomes, scapes, bracts. These all start with the word blade. And here we've missed one. Petiole, blade, petiole. This one's gotten pushed over into another box. Rounded to petiole, base, rounded to petiole. Huh. I think, I don't know where the other petiole descriptions would be. So there's kind of an interesting break in the pattern there. I'm going to tack this onto the leaf description. So it's a leaf description, but it starts with blade. And I'm going to take that out for now. So drag these over. So now I've got a column that starts with flower. Here's another one, starts with perianth. Really, I think what I want to do is make this spread out more. So I'm going to push things to the right if they don't line up just yet. So that this one that starts perianth really should be starting well, it needs to be equivalent. So we need to sort of find perianth in the other descriptions. And I don't know if we're going to find those, but we're going to push sepals over so that these line up. Sepals, sepals, sepals. Petals, 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 stamens, stamens, filaments, filaments, anthers, anthers. Ovaries, there's another one. Ovaries all line up. Stigmas. This we have a few that mention style before stigmas. Stigmas, pedicel, fruits. All right. So I'm a little hesitant to do this. Let's see what happens. One thing you can do with the data, all the data are getting cut off at the end of boxes. We can do a format, text wrapping. So this allows us to see all the text, but it also really highlights when we have one of these columns or characteristics that's a little more wordy. So I don't know if we're ready for this yet. Let's give it a shot. So you can stretch out the sizes of the boxes a little bit. That'll allow these columns to come in a little bit less tall. All right, and this is the part where you're wondering what the heck we're doing here. Okay. I don't want to go through the whole process, but I want to maybe flag some of the stuff you could do with these spreadsheets. So we've got, maybe we'll go through, just start from the left. We got rhizome characteristics, right? So rhizomes, short, comma, thick, short, thick, somewhat erect, thick, premorse. I'm not even familiar with that term. Let's give it a look and see what it talks about. Premorse. Images. Fishtail. All right. Looks like it's kind of chopped up at the end. Let's go back to maybe a text definition here. Splitting at the adaxial side, typically observed in palms. Wiktionary. Premorse. Terminated abruptly or as if bitten off. Oh yeah. All right. So word origin, premordere, to bite off. Okay. Rhizomes. Bitten off. Well, I don't know if we're going to be using that rhizome characteristic so much. So there's some descriptions: short, thick, thick versus slender. So if you wanted a real rhizome characteristic to tell species apart, you could go thick versus slender on some of these. This is one that's not described as either thick or slender. Let's see, maybe we can find something a little more useful. Number of scapes, 1 to 2, 1 to 2, 1 to several, 1 to 2 to 3, 1, 1. So those all include 1. It's not, we're not able to eliminate any species by comparing the number of scapes. How about sizes? 1.5 to 4 decimeters. This is a 1 decimeter is 10 centimeters. So decimeter sometimes is a shorthand way of saying, so 1.5 to 4 decimeters is 15 to 40 centimeters. Maybe a little more familiar measurement for you. So 1.5 to 4, 1.5 to 6. Here's one. So here's, I was looking for features, measurements that don't overlap. And a lot of these seem to include roughly 2 decimeters. So you couldn't exclude, you couldn't differentiate this one from this one because 1.5 to 4 includes the range of 2 to 5. They overlap quite a bit. But these are greater than 1.5, greater than 1.5, greater than 2, greater than 1.5, greater than 1.5. So here we go. We got maybe our first useful trait. And maybe what I want to do to keep track of this is to come up with a column here I'm going to call escape length, I guess. And you could put in the actual numbers, or you could decide up front that you've got a cutoff. So we've got one that's definitely, I think we could even safely say greater than 1.5 decimeters. And then you could copy that and paste it into here, bigger than 1.5, bigger than 1.5, bigger than 1.5. So now we have a category, right? We have a cutoff, and then this one's less than 0.5 decimeters. Okay, so here we've got a smaller range at the onset of anthesis. Anthesis is the fancy way to say flower opening. So at the time when the flowers open, they're only up to 0.5 decimeters, and later in the process up to 0.8 decimeters. Either way, those are still much less than our 1.5. So whether you get it early or late in the flowering to fruiting process, still much different measurements there. I'm going to do a view freeze. I'm going to freeze a column so I can see my species names. And I'll go ahead and do a freeze a row so I can see my category summaries. All right, bracts. Let's go to our image description here. I don't always think about bracts on Trillium. I'm trying to think of where those are. Bracts often overlapping, sessile or bench and pendulum base blade. Trillium. Bracts in a whorl of 3. Well, that's interesting. All right, well, there's no term in this description or any of these descriptions that's called leaves. So we're going for, I think this terminology for this group of plants is going to refer to the things that look like leaves as bracts. I would go ahead and call those leaves personally, but we're going to stick with the descriptions on here. Actually kind of clears that up a little bit for me. So so I'm going to need a new column, and then I'll, oops, sorry, get a little carried away here. All right, sorted, don't sort. Color on here. Over here, insert one left, and so this will be, first thing I can look at is petiole. This one's called sessile or with a barely noticeable petiole-like base. So a couple of these are kind of borderline sessile or subsessile. So these are missing a petiole, lacking a petiole. A couple of these are a little more prominently described as having petioles. So I'm going to try to put them in a category. So these describe petioles that you can clearly see. I guess if you want to be really particular, you could say sessile or with a tiny, I don't know how more technical to be here, petiole. So we got another split we could use there. And so this first trait of escape length separates out Trillium nivale from everything else. Here we've got a trait that would separate Trillium nivale and Trillium recurvatum from everybody else. Maybe we could go through to flowers, insert one left, flower aspect. Usually hidden beneath bracts, nodding. All right, so I'm looking for nodding versus erect, and see if these are all described. Flexed about 90 degrees to face outward rather than upward. So I guess you could do nodding or flexed sideways. Let's see if I can find our illustration here. So an erect flower is going, has this pedicel for the flower going straight up. And then there's some of these trilliums, these are forest understory plants, and sometimes their flowers are drooping down. So Trillium catesbii, not one of our species, but illustrating this aspect of the flower pointing downwards. A couple here not showing how the flowers are born. So straight up or bending down. And I'll go ahead and make this characteristic nodding or flexed sideways. We'll match both of those. Here we've got erect, here we've got flower erect, here we've got flower erect. So you don't necessarily have to have any plan about what species are going to be grouped together, but helpful to have different species grouped in different ways. So here we've got two of these together with something in common. Here's the different two that have something in common, having pedicels that are pointed out in a different direction. There's a lot of text in here. I think we could probably find a lot of useful information in there. You could potentially, I'm a little nervous to do it, but if you wanted to take this petals, really a little mini paragraph there, you could separate this out. You'd want to make room for it and then maybe split it by commas. I think maybe you could just also kind of hunt in there. Let's do that. Let's do some hunting and see if we can find some characteristics in there that are useful. So one thing I'm kind of curious about is petal color. So kind of buried in there, petals, white or rarely pale pink. And maybe I'll just type in what they say. Petals, dark reddish brown, maroon, purple, or white, sometimes pale yellow. This looks like it might not be so helpful in this species. Brown, maroon, purple, white, pale yellow. Too many. Here's another one, creamy white. Dun, 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 dun. White or rarely pink. I'll go with that one. I'll just go ahead and copy that over, white or pale pink, or maybe we'll call it rarely pink. White and dark maroon, purple to clear yellow. Dark maroon to clear yellow. Occasionally two colored with purple and yellow. So I wasn't sure what we would get. Looks like there's a lot of variation. So even if we wanted to say some of these are white, we got white and creamy white and white and white. Those ones come across as white, but unfortunately, even these ones that we don't think of as white also have white in the list of possibles, right? So white, clear, yellow seems not too far off from white. So we might not be able to use that. Maybe. Another possibility is if you are able to eliminate one of these more variable species and it's not part of that part of your key, you could fill in using data from other species that are a little easier to tell apart. Let's go with maybe some lengths here. So petal length. Here's kind of a common way to describe an organ is length and width. So a range of values times a range of values. The convention is length and then width, or obviously one of these is often longer than the other one. So I'm going to just look through here and see if there might be a feature, a big difference in size on these, 1.5 to 2.5, 1.5 to 5, 2 to 5, 4 to 7.5. So let's see if that helps us out. Greater than 4. All right, so here's one that kind of overlaps a little bit. 1.8 to 4.8. Put centimeters on there. 2 to 5. Oops. 2 to 5 centimeters, not February. 1.5 to 2.5 centimeters. 1.5 to 5 centimeters. I'm going to fill these in, I guess. 1.5 to 3.5 centimeters. All right, so this one's pretty handy. This has a fairly low maximum, but it still overlaps with this one. Still overlaps just a little bit with this one. Trillium cernum does not overlap with Trillium grandiflorum, so that's handy. Trillium nivale also doesn't overlap with that one. So we might have, in this one species that has the biggest variation, we might have a big one, and then a couple of these that we can split out as littler ones. So less than that, less than 4, just a couple of these. So kind of at first glance on this one, not every species of Trillium is going to have petal lengths that don't overlap. But maybe we can use the ones that's actually true for. So we've got a collection of traits, and we might even be able to build our key at this point. So I don't know, maybe I'll try to build it. Hold on, let me get up a file that I can build a key on. All right, so I gave us a blank key to start filling in. I'm going to take advantage of my big screen here, and I'll be able to start building the key in a window that's next to my existing window. So it's just a blank table right now. We could go, you could start with whatever character you think is most useful and start, just start filling it in. So let's just start, I guess, from the left. We have these two kinds of petioles, and we got some that are distinctly petiolate and some not so much. So in my key, I'm going to call this couplet 1 and say we've got some, I'm going to go ahead and stick with their vocabulary and call these bracts. Sessile, or with a little more technical, small petiole. So small is the kind of word that you want to avoid words that might be subjective. So I don't know if it's really defined on here. Let's say less than 1 centimeter. I'm not sure we'll get information about that. Barely noticeable petiole-like base. So I don't know if this is going to hold up less than 1 centimeter, maybe greater than 1 centimeter. But that would be good to have in a key. I don't see it on here. Really should be on there. You know, barely noticeable. Even something like barely noticeable might be difficult for somebody to feel confident about encountering that in the actual plant and making a decision. Sessile with small petiole, and then we've got bracts distinctly petiolate. And let's say that's greater than 1 centimeter. What I might want to do here is just list the species in each of these endpoints. So Trillium cernum, Trillium erectum, Trillium flexipes, and Trillium grandiflorum. And then this second group is going to go to Trillium nivale and Trillium recurvatum. What it's really going to do is one of these is going to go to another couplet. So I put the species names in there. That's going to allow me to keep track of who's in there. So fancy it up and make them And I'm going to leave this one uncertain as to where that's going to go until we resolve out this first one. So you kind of keep track of where all your endpoints are for the descriptions you've got. All right, so we did petiole. Now we can go over and look at flower aspect. And this can be helpful if we look at the species we have here and try to subdivide those. So conveniently, we used the first 4 species alphabetically. If you wanted to resort your spreadsheet, depending on the characteristics you used, for example, you could sort by this column, and it would sort the plants with erect flowers from the ones that have flexed flowers. So either way, but kind of handy in this group, Cernum, Erectum, Flexipes, Grandiflorum. Erectum and Grandiflorum have erect flowers. Cernum, Flexipes have nodding flowers. So flowers on erect pedicel, and that'll be, what did I say, Erectum Grandiflorum. I'm going to just copy these down. And then flowers on nodding or flexed pedicel, and that was Cernum Flexipes. Bloop. All right. So again, we've got 2 endpoints, which are species, and none of these is all the way to a single species yet. So we need a trait that will tell Erectum from Grandiflorum, and then maybe a different one, maybe the same trait that would tell Cernum from Flexipes. So let's go to, we had this one that we weren't sure about how useful it was going to be. Cernum, different from Grandiflorum. Those are already divided up. Cernum versus Flexipes. Here's one. Almost different in petal length, but not enough. There's a little bit of overlap in that 2.5. So let's say what we're going to do here is we've got Cernum and Flexipes. We could just scroll through and try to look for something that tells these apart. All right, so size, overlapping, glabrous, tracts, sessile. Sessile, we already did that one. All right, blade bright green, blade medium green, not really that different. Blade size is 5 to 15, 7 to 25, overlapping, base attenuate, apex acuminate, acuminate. Flower usually hidden beneath bracts. I don't see that nodding, odorless. All right, we're going to keep going here. Sepals spreading, sepals weakly recurved. So you can almost use those to tell them apart. So spreading would be sepals that are pointing 90 degrees out from the pedicel. Sepals weakly recurved would be pointing back down towards the base of the pedicel. Maybe, I don't know if I have enough confidence that would be a distinguishing feature. Slightly shorter, equally petals, shorter than or barely equaling petals, margins slightly raised versus entire, apex acuminate. So it looks like we have some species that are pretty similar to each other. Might be a little tricky here. Just, I think for the interest of this exercise, let's go ahead and use this sepals spreading versus sepals weakly recurved. I'm just going to slip through real quick here. White to pinkish pyramidal, 6 angle, 16. Stigmas. Oh, here's another one. Stigmas erect, stigmas recurved. Oh wait, stigmas erect, comma recurved. That's not helpful. Pedicels strongly recurved, pedicels stiffly erect. Interesting. Erect but horizontal. I don't know if I would go with that term erect. I generally think straight upwards when I think erect. Fruits dark red, rosy. All right, so this is probably enough to tell these species apart, especially if somebody's a little more familiar with them. I think for us, we'll just stick with the sepal thing. So Cernuum versus Flexipes. I guess I'm already in there. I'm going to go ahead and make these. Yeah, let's make that 4 so we don't lose ourselves entirely. We'll come back to 3. So sepals, spreading, sepals, weakly recurved, and spreading would be, just go ahead and copy the names down, Trillium cernuum, sepals recurved. So spending a little more time getting familiar with these species, you'd probably have something better to work with than sepals spreading or recurved. For now, I think we're going to stick with that one. The other two we want to tell apart as a result of this is erectum and grandiflorum. So I'm going to highlight them, do the same thing, try to look through here and see anything that stands out as a difference. Scape length. Brax already used that one. Blade color, bright green to dark green. Blade size, 5 to 20, 12 to 20. Apex acuminate. Odor fetid like a wet dog. How often do you get to see that? Flower erect ascending, out facing erect. Sepals flat to sulcate, apically green. 10 to 50 millimeters, apex acuminate, margins entire, texture, texture is leafy. Petals spreading, petals erect, basally, recurving somewhat. 2 times sepal width, apex acuminate, petal length, oh, so close. Petal color, we could almost go with petal color here, white or rarely pink, versus this one that has most of its description don't involve being white, but still I don't know if I'd quite go with that one. Petal length, I guess I'll doing this on the fly, not always easy to make a call. Stigmas erect, stigmas recurved, distinct. Weak, connate, all right. We'll go ahead and use this one. So we found one that is described differently. Stigmas recurved, stigmas erect. So that would be Trillium erectum. Remind ourselves that was heading to 3. And stigmas erect. Was grandiflorum. So another thing, if you take more time on this, you can find potentially, if you're really trying to tell 2 species apart, you could use more than one trait to tell them apart. So I also see we've got, we had the kind of different petal length. So if it's not the only thing you're using to tell species apart, it might be helpful to put it in there. Stigmas recurved, petals, Trillium erectum was less than 5 centimeters versus petals greater than 4 centimeters. I guess if you want to be a little more precise, you can make this greater than or equal to 5 centimeters. sorry, less than or equal to 5 centimeters, greater than or equal to 4 centimeters. I'm just going to leave them as they are right now. So a little bit of a shame we weren't able to group Trillium grandiflorum with something else that was definitely distinguished in petal length. You could also, I guess you could revise your key, come back in and make sure the distinction emphasizes Trillium grandiflorum versus Trillium cernulum, say. So if we didn't tell them apart by how their flowers are arranged, we could tell them apart by petal size. Lots of ways to write the old key. Okay, so we've got 4 of these that end at single species. These would be positively identified by our key. And then we can go back up here, and we left a couple of these hanging. So I'm going to say that those will go to 5 now. And couplet 5, we want to tell Trillium nivale from Trillium recurvatum. So last distinction to make. I don't know, we've been at this for a while, so maybe I'll just leave it going. We've got just the first thing I noticed here, we've got Trillium nivale cleanly described as white petals. Trillium recurvatum described as dark maroon to clear yellow, so white is not part of the description there. So petals white and petals dark maroon to clear yellow. You could even, I see a few others on here, so stamens straight versus stamens incurved. You could throw that on there for a little icing on the cake. Stamens incurved. Stamens straight, and stamens straight was Trillium nivale. Bloop, Trillium recurvatum. Boom. All right, so we got a key. So I don't know how long we've been at this, but you know, start to finish, from a description to a table to a key, didn't take us terribly long. You know, this is something you should be able to do within a lab period. So I'll plan to give you descriptions and a chance to do all this data building yourself, and then you can share your results with me, including the table, and maybe we'll find out that we've got a table that's super useful. Maybe. All right.